It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview one of the three business owners of the podcast, StickinRink Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Brandon. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to come up with a sports talk hockey podcast?
Well, my friend, I would say me and my friends, my other co-host Josh, we used to work together, and even our other producer Raffle, who joined us later in the show. We work together, and I would say we banter back and forth a lot. We make fun of each other. We exchange hockey opinions ever so often. And at the time, Spittin' Chicklets was blowing up as well, and we were huge listeners. And we thought, man, this is not only is this like it's fun, but it seems really easy to do. And so we kind of just buckled down and set up our own shop. And before you know it, we were off and running.
Of course, how did you come up with the name of your podcast, Stickin' the Rink?
So funny story. I actually don't even really like the name, so I'll kind of tell you where it comes from. So we when we were making our own show, like me and Josh had our own thing going on for about 6 months. We were called Ride the Pod, kind of a play on words of Ride the Pine. And when Isha approached us about the Hockey Podcast Network, he obviously wanted us to do the Vancouver channel, but we were a very new show. We didn't have much of a base set up yet for listeners or anything, or even followers. And so they agreed to just give us their show because they were going to step back and just run the network. And so the StickinRink Podcast is actually their show that they passed on to us, which has a great following, has a great base already built into it. Although the name where it comes from is the Vancouver Canucks jersey. Like one of their vintage jerseys is a stick in a rink. And so that's kind of a well-known phrase throughout the Vancouver community is stick and rink, and you instantly think of that jersey. So, and we're Canucks podcast, at least we were. We still pretty much are, but yeah, that's what we're going with it.
Of course, now that you talked about the Hockey Podcast Network, what was it like whenever you joined the Hockey Podcast Network?
What was it like when we joined? Well,
Mhm.
it was in its infancy stage. Like it was its first year going on, and so Isha and Dylan were just independently doing it. They had started everything from scratch. They had found a host podcast for every single show, and so that was off and running. And come October, I mean, it was like I give credit to these two, Dylan Kaiser and Isha Jerome. They set up all of this huge infrastructure all by themselves, and it really ran pretty well from the beginning. But it's like anything else. It was constantly experimenting with things like how to grow, how to do different things, how to attract more listeners. And then obviously throughout the last summer, they were acquired by Amaze Media Labs, which is a new media startup. So that kind of gave it a lot of legitimacy. And here we are. You got guys like us, man. You got guys like us leading the ship.
Of course, what is it like to know that there are many hockey teams podcasts, not just, of course, Vancouver Canucks on the network?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's much more of a team atmosphere. That's what's cool about it, Brendan. It's like totally when you're thinking about podcasts, you think, okay, obviously you kind of want the attention on yourself. Like, you want the viewers for yourself. You want the money, the viewers, the buzz, everything that goes along with it. But at the same time, hockey's not an individual sport. And so the podcasting doesn't have to be either. I think when you kind of put 31 shows all together, there is a business side to it where you lend a lot more legitimacy to this brand, and you have a lot more power as a group. But also even just in the sense of the people that are on the network, like we've done a lot of events together and in combination with each other. Like we've been guests on each other's shows. And we've also done huge events where we do like an entire network wide DraftKings event. Like that was something I threw a few weeks ago. And that's one of the benefits of a big network like this, for sure.
What are some of the topics that you talk about on your podcast?
Well, Brandon, is this an R-rated show? I mean, I got to cut out some of the stuff, but we basically, me, Josh, and Rafa, we intentionally try and make sure it's not just sports, it's sports and entertainment. We do cover the Canucks, obviously, so the bulk of our hockey talk is Vancouver based. But we've done our best to just make sure it's as ridiculous as people want and as we want. So we do segments like Goats and Woats where we always pick a topic, then we go over we do a snake draft style greatest of all time and worst of all time. So we on Tuesday we did letters of the alphabet. So just went through and ridiculed each other for that. But we also, it's like a sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of idea too. Like nothing's off limits with us.
What is something that you learned now that you didn't know before starting the podcast?
Well, I would say I expected as much time you have to put in. There's obviously a lot of time you have to put into these things, not just on the hands-on recording stuff and setting aside time to make content, but also just the other stuff that goes into it. I expected that to take time for sure. I would say what I didn't expect is how you have to be ready to pivot, like the different avenues that you put your content down. Like for a podcast example being, I always just thought, okay, that the way to grow is only really through Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but you learn very quickly that there's tons of other no-name streaming apps as well, and web and things to do on a desktop. But there's also there's Twitch that you got to get into. There's, you could do a TikTok account if you want, you could do everything. Like, so we're really diversifying what we are. We're trying to look at ourselves more as a brand than just a podcast at this point, and that's what I'm kind of surprised at.
Of course, joining the Hockey Podcast Network, what are some of the benefits that has come along with that?
Well, free beer. No, I'm just kidding. They don't give us free beer, unfortunately. But we're spread across two huge countries like this. I would say the benefit of it is just having everything's better in groups, in the sense of you always have someone to bounce ideas off, right? So even if I have an idea for something grand and something huge and takes a lot of moving parts, there's guys and girls there that are able, you're able to bounce ideas off of and hear feedback. But also in the same sense, there's tons of awesome content for me to jump in on. Like I can be guests on other people's shows like I'm doing now, or I can ask people to come on my show. It's pretty cool like that.
What are some of your future plans with the Stick in the Rink podcast?
Well, it's a good question, Brandon. We've, like I said earlier in an earlier question, we were definitely looking at ways to diversify. We're not exactly, how should I put it? We're not satisfied with where we're at right now. We want to grow more and more. And so we have looked at all these different ways to grow, and we've decided that live streaming is going to be a big thing for us. So we live stream all of our episodes right now, and then also post them on podcast form. So if anyone's listening, you can catch our live stream episodes. We do them on Sunday around 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then we also do them late nights on Tuesday. We do late night podcasts around 11 o'clock Pacific time. So Brandon, I expect you to stay up till 2 a.m. one of these nights and check our show. I don't know. I guess it'd be a Wednesday morning for you.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Of course, have you interviewed any people on your podcast?
Interviews? Oh yeah, we do. We try and do one every episode. I mean, there was a long time during COVID where I wasn't a big fan of the Zoom interviews. Like we were an in-person podcast, and we love doing things in person. And so that, like it was for everyone, this was quite a bit of a shock, this life. And so from that, we've pivoted a lot, and we do a ton of radio personalities in the area. But we also, on our last episode, like we tend to pivot quite a bit. We don't just do sports, like I said. And so on our last episode, we brought on a Twitch streamer and she was talking about gaming and what it's like to live stream and all the different types of video games. Like we literally talked video games for probably 45 minutes. And so that was sweet. And we have plans coming up in the future just to bring on different guys. Like I'm looking at an author currently. And, we like to be definitely have a broad scope of things for sure.
What advice would you give upcoming future sports talk podcasts looking to get started?
I would say pay Elijah $100. No, that would be a sick idea. I mean, I wish I could do that. I wish I had like a master class out in this whole podcasting thing. That would be a clinic. But some advice that I would give, I would say, whatever idea you have for a sports show, it's most likely already out there. And so how are you going to be different is really the question you have to ask yourself. Is it your personality? Is it your skills with graphic design and the way to add quality through video content like that? But personally, I just think whatever avenue you tend on exploring, you should expect to have about 5 to 6 other avenues in addition to that one to be able to grow your show the way you want to. Because I mean, it's no secret that podcasting is a extremely saturated market right now. But that's not to take away any opportunity. There's money to be made here. There's fun to be had, and there's dreams to pursue. Like, it's even though our numbers aren't really where we want them to be play wise, every single time we get together, I would say when we get to record and we sit down, even if it's through StreamYard, which we use, man, it is a shit show, and I love it. Like, I love every minute of it. The work outside of it's a bit hard, but it's all worth it in the end.
That's amazing. Where can my listeners find your podcast at on social media and podcast platforms?
So like I was saying earlier, we've been doing live streaming a lot, those schedules. So you can find our live streams on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. All of our pages, every single one of our social media pages and platforms are all StickinRink Pod. So very easy. It's a stick like a tree branch, in like in, and rink like a hockey rink. And then just short for podcast, put pod on the end of that. You'll find us everywhere. As for where to find our podcast episodes, we drop the full episodes. Each one's about an hour and a half long. We do 2 a week, and you can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Our host site is Megaphone. Where else are we doing things? Probably Amazon has some sort of app, I imagine, Google Play, all these things.
That's wonderful. Thank you again, Elijah, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with StickinRink Podcasts.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate your time, man.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brand, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.